Prisoner was seen wriggling his throat, biting down on the bottle of medicine in his mouth. The doctor soon realized that something was wrong. The maximum dose of anesthetic had been administered, but Mike hadn't lost consciousness. The police were about to step in to check on him. Mike had already withdrawn his hand. Suddenly his eyes opened. He threw up his leg and kicked him. The officer rushed from the door. Mike had already pulled out the air tube next to him. He used a flint hidden under his fingernails to light the oxygen. The operating theater was in chaos. It turns out that Mike was taking advantage of his time in the hospital to complete his escape plan. He spits the pieces out of his mouth. Then he turned and ran, grabbed 2 starters, and drilled into the ventilation duct. He made it to the laundry room, put on a white coat. When the officers came looking for him, he was nowhere to be found. Turns out Mike had crawled back through the ventilation ducts, pretending to be a doctor. He boldly walked to the radiology department. He threatened the doctor with a knife and used a laser gun to fire the shackles. Then he ran to the emergency room. He was going to operate on himself without anesthetic. He took the shrapnel out of his thigh. Then he stitched up the wound with a needle. The pain was excruciating. Mike soon infiltrated the ward again. He took a female doctor hostage. The police arrived shortly afterwards, but Mike didn't panic. He played a psychological game. He told the officers, if he died, the bone marrow would be useless. Your son wouldn't be able to live either. The officer was convinced, threw his gun on the ground, afraid that his colleague would shoot Mike. The officer even took cover, but the sound of the walkie-talkie, the police officer behind the curtain, was exposed. Mike raised his hand and fired several shots, killed 2 officers in front of and behind him. He never thought he would get his colleagues killed. The officers were at a loss for words. He watched as Mike fled. Then the chief arrived. He asked the officer in anger, how many more people do you want to kill your son? The officer was then relieved of his duties. On the other hand, Mike took the female doctor to the storage room. He ordered the doctor to bring him cyclopropane. This gas is very explosive. In the interval between bending down to get the canister, she suddenly hit Mike on the head and then hit him in the leg. She picked up the pistol and ran away. Mike Wells didn't go after her. He had other plans.